help out with as many different groups that are fighting for our liberty and freedom as possible. So yes, I am a member of the Policy Council, and if you're not, I encourage you to become one. Just make a donation to help out, and then you're a member. I am the state coordinator for Campaign for Liberty, which is a group that does much of what the Policy Council does, and much the same thing that you guys do. We fight for liberty, freedom, individual liberty and responsibility, free markets, and also have a little group called Palmetto Liberty PAC that we grade and score our legislators in the state on how well they vote. So go to palmettoliberty.com, check it out. You can see our scorecard, download it there, and I encourage you to subscribe to our updates. It's not a spam list. You will not get very many emails from me, especially this time of year. You'll probably get virtually zero. You'll get a lot more during the legislative session. By a lot more, I mean probably 1 or 2 a week at the peak time, and that is when we need to make things happen and get things done, which you guys do really, really well. Now I'm going to tell you, what Ashley talked about, I endorse 100%. That is what we need in this state, and it's just a beginning. It's just a beginning. The legislature, the governor, our politicians and elected officials, they like to talk about reform. But I'm going to tell you from personal experience, and you guys know the same thing because you've been in the trenches fighting as well, they don't like to give us reform. They talk about it, it's a good talking point, it's a good thing for them around election time to get your vote. But when it comes time to doing it, they don't do it unless you force it and make it happen. The only time we've ever gotten really good, true reform in this state is when y'all have made it happen. It happened, well, on roll call. You guys made it happen. When we stopped the I-95 Corridor Authority, which was a done deal, that passed the Senate by an overwhelming majority. It passed the House by an overwhelming majority. The governor vetoed it. The Senate overrode her veto. And fortunately, the House decided to wait until the next year to vote on the governor's veto, which was this year for us, luckily. I found out about it because of the Policy Council's research. It was in their best and worst, which I was going over and saw, the I-95 Corridor Authority. I went and reviewed the House and what the vote was, and those I thought that we could pressure, and I realized we can stop it. And so I let you guys know about what was going on over a couple of months' time, and when it came time in January for it to be stopped, it was voted down almost unanimously because of what you did. And I'll give you one little example of how that happened, and it was down in Somerville. There's a representative down there, her name is Jeannie Horn. And some of her constituents called me and invited me to go down to a meeting they were having with her, trying to convince her to oppose the I-95 Corridor Authority, which is a huge increase in state government. Over a third of our state geographically, to control the economy, the infrastructure, the education, the whole 9 yards, by some bureaucrats that would be appointed by Bobby Harrell and Hugh Leatherman and some of those guys. So they invited me to come down to sit in on the meeting. And basically that's what I did. I sat in. I had a few comments, but didn't say a whole lot because her constituents were all over it. And for about 30 minutes tried to convince her to vote against the I-95 Corridor Authority. And she said at the end of the meeting, very politely, you know what, I appreciate you coming in, but you just don't understand. This is what we need in this part of the state, and I'm going to be supporting it because the people that live in the I-95 Corridor, they really can't take care of themselves. The state needs to come in and help them out. This is a Republican, by the way. And I'm going to be supporting it. Thank you for your time. And as they were filing out the door, they were polite, shaking her hand. Appreciate your time, Miss Horn. Good luck in your primary. Thank you, Miss Horn. Good luck in your primary. And they meant it. And guess what? When it came time for that vote, she voted with the governor's veto. It was one of the people, most of them, who ended up seeing the writing on the wall that you were going to have none of it. And they believed you when you told them that it was either vote the way you wanted them to vote or they could find a new job when election time came around. And I'm telling you, that is the only way these politicians move to do something they don't want to do, is when you make it very clear to them that you will accept no compromise at all with how much power and authority they get to keep. See, it's not compromise with each other. It's not that at all. You know, some things, there's a difference of opinion in the state on what should be done. But these things, with a few exceptions, there's very little. I'll tell you what, I've been talking around the state on this now quite a bit. And there's 2 people now that I now know of who disagree with one of the points of the Policy Council. There's not many. And I'm going to tell you, the good guys even need not just your support, but you're holding them accountable and not allowing them to compromise. Because they will. And I'll give you a real short example. I know we've been sitting in here a long time, but it's critical that you understand that even the good guys who most of the time are down there fighting for us and voting the way that we need them to vote, even they're subject to the Capitol Complex syndrome. And they will compromise away your right to your freedom and liberty. And I'll tell you from personal experience, two things. Governor Haley was the public champion of the roll call bill. And that got her elected. I truly believe that fight got her elected as governor. In 2010, the first time the House passed it. You remember they passed it and then the session ended because the Senate didn't finish it up and we had to come back and start over again. The House passed it unanimously. But not before the bill had to be recalled out of committee. And Nikki Haley made the motion for that recall. But she didn't want to make it. I had lots of phone conversations with her, trying to convince her to make that motion. Now, she never said, I don't want to make that motion. But she would put it off. She would delay it. You know what? Dan Cooper, who was the chair of the committee that it was in, he promised me he's going to have a hearing on it this week. This week goes by, I call her back. Hey, Haley, you didn't have the hearing. You need to make the motion to recall it. No, something came up. They had to work on the budget. He's going to have a hearing next week. And this went on for probably a month. And finally, I could see the writing on the wall. You know, I'm slow, but I do finally get it. And I called her up and I said, Nikki, you know, this keeps getting delayed. If we keep delaying, it's never going to get passed. And the people are not going to be happy that you didn't make the motion to recall this bill. The next day, she made the motion to recall the bill. She was running for governor at the time, so that bill got recalled. The next day is when they had the vote on it. She wasn't there. She was up in Greenville campaigning. And there was a big stink about her not being there to vote on her bill because she was campaigning. That's why she didn't want to recall the bill. She wanted to keep campaigning on that bill. Now, you think that sounds harsh, but I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. When we did finally get the bill passed, it was in the Senate. And you remember the big fight was that Glenn McConnell and his group said it was not constitutional, that it violated the South Carolina Constitution to require them to vote on the record. And Larry Martin, you have to ask him.
He is very creative.
And he could give you a very good explanation that sounded very convincing.
I heard it, but I didn't believe it.
Thank you. Thank you. I got a phone call. I was actually here that night that I got a phone call. Not here, it was when we were meeting over there at the other place. I was driving back from here, and I got a phone call from a dear friend who told me, Talbert, we've got trouble with roll call. I said, it's in the Senate. The House is passing. We're going good. He said, no. The governor has agreed to the compromise that this bill will not be effective until after a constitutional amendment is passed in South Carolina. See, normally when bills are passed, there's a little line at the bottom that says effective immediately upon signature of the governor. And that's the way this bill was written. But Haley and Larry Martin and Glenn McConnell had gotten behind closed doors and worked out a deal because she's governor now, and she doesn't want her bill to die. She wants it to pass. She doesn't think that we're going to be able to push it through. So she makes a compromise. If that compromise had gone through, we would not have mandatory recorded votes today because the constitutional amendment takes, in South Carolina, 2 legislative sessions before it gets passed. They have to vote for it in 1 legislative session. Then it goes to you, to the people in a ballot, to vote for it and agree to it. And then it goes back to the next legislature to ratify that. So it takes, at a minimum, 2 years to get it passed. At that time, it would have been 3 years. You would not have a scorecard today if that compromise had been agreed to.